Well, thank you so much for joining us for today's Backpacks to Briefcases Tax Tips 2023. I'm Greg Byrd, Director of Communications in the UAB Office of Alumni Affairs. Since this is a virtual event, please excuse any technical issues or glitches that may pop up. If you have problems with video or audio, click the reconnect button on your screen to get you back to the webinar right away. Also, we are recording today's webinar. The video will be uploaded onto our website by tomorrow. If you have questions for Dr. Byrd throughout the presentation, please place them in the chat. We will have time for Q&A. Did you know that this webinar, you can earn credit towards a Backpacks to Briefcases Evergreen Certificate? This series features events throughout the year with topics ranging from workplace skills to finance. We also have golden electives that include lunch and learns, networking events, and volunteer opportunities. To get an Evergreen Certificate and lapel pin, you have to complete all 4 Evergreen events and 2 golden electives. They don't have to happen in the same calendar year, same fiscal year, nothing like that. Just join on whenever you're able. Want to learn more? You can visit alumni.uab.edu/backpacks. Today, we welcome Dr. Jim Byrd to our webinar series. Dr. Byrd is an assistant professor of accounting and finance in the Klatt School of Business. He's also a 2-time UAB alum, earning his Master of Accounting in 2009 and his Doctor of Philosophy in Healthcare Administration and Management in 2013. At this time, I would like to formally welcome Dr. Byrd and turn things over to him. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Real honor to speak to the alums, and so just glad to be here. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you have further questions later. Always glad to talk with you. So let's see. So I thought where we could start is who has to file a return. Very basic. And talking federal, Alabama's much the same, but different numbers. Of course, much smaller numbers, but in general, if you're single, under 65, and have income of $12,950 or more, you're required to file. What that number is, all these numbers in this column are the standard deduction. So if you're earning more than the standard deduction, then the standard deduction won't get you to zero. So you have to file a return to make sure you're not subject to penalties or anything like that. But it's not a huge deal. It's just different from each one of these categories for different reasons. So 65 and older get a little bit of a break. Larger standard deduction, 14.7 for singles. Married filing jointly, notice this is much larger than the single status, and under 65 is basically twice. For a long time, there was almost a penalty for filing a joint return, and the last tax bill kind of rectified that a little bit. So you're definitely still better off if you're married to file a joint return. The higher standard deduction, of course, that goes against both incomes, and so on and so forth. Now, here's what's kind of funny is that if you are married and want to file separately, if you want to file different from your spouse, well, if you have more than $5 in income, you have to file a return for that. So there's not a lot of reasons to ever file separately. But you know, saying in jest, it's always a good idea to involve your spouse into what's going on so that they know what you're putting in the return and that kind of thing. And I say that sort of not in jest too, because even if you're not the one that's preparing and sending the return in, you're still obligated and on the hook for any filing problems that your spouse may have made in preparing the return. So, and if you're filing joint return, joint efforts. Head of household is another category, and head of household is is better than a single. That basically you're single, you don't have a spouse, but you have kids, or you have some other dependent and you get a little bit of a break, a larger standard deduction in that case. And then one of the newer categories, a qualifying widower, you get to use the married filing jointly rates for, I think it is 2 years after your spouse passes away, which that helps. That always helps a little bit. So that's kind of who has to file a return. So what if you may want to file one anyway if you're not on that list? And that would be if you're working and you have taxes withheld. You know, if you're underneath that threshold to file, you're not going to have to pay any taxes, but you have to file the return in order to get the refund back. And in previous years, I guess the COVID benefits and all that, that was based on returns that had been filed. And so not filing return could have caused you to miss out on some of the benefits for that. But so there are reasons to file a return, even if you haven't reached the threshold of income. And there's a couple of other refundable tax credits. Now, so most of the time you have tax credits, they will reduce tax, reduce your tax bill. But the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit are refundable in the sense that you can get that money even if you haven't paid in any withholding taxes. So it's definitely worth checking it. If you have kids, take a look and make sure that you're getting all the benefits that you can. Okay, the third item here is, you probably know if you do or don't, but if you made estimated payments during the year, that's kind of like withholding, but you're paying it in yourself. And so if you overpaid, you need to file a return in order to get a refund of that. Now, some things you may not think about is this is about filing a tax return, but it gives you a document. So if you're going to apply for a mortgage or financial aid or at the bank or something like that, trying to get a loan, they're going to ask you for your last tax return, maybe your last 2 or 3 tax returns. And that's going to be something that the lenders will take a look at in assessing what you're qualified for and are eligible to borrow under their programs. It's not uniform across the board, but it's something they will ask for. And then the last item down here is if you have self-employment income. So you're not working for somebody else who's withholding, you're just working for yourself, and you may have to pay self-employment tax for that, but that's also necessary in order to get credit for future Social Security benefits. If you're working for yourself your whole life, you get to age 65 and you never worked for anybody and never paid any in Social Security, then you won't have any Social Security available to you at that point in time. So this is just something to help provide for you later in life. So what income is taxable? Yeah, that's on everybody's mind, right? But most of this stuff I think is fairly self-evident. Wages, salaries, those kinds of things. You'll get a W-2. If you work at UAB, you can get it through the Oracle system. If you work outside of UAB, I think they probably email it or send it to you, either mail or email. But you have to get a W-2 and all the income on it will tell you how much you have to pay. Now, the thing about the W-2 also, it tells how much you paid in. So you'll need that document when you're preparing the return so that you can take credit for everything you paid in, potentially get a refund for that as well. The next item, interest and dividends. It's another 1099, but it's INT, DIV. So if you've got interest income from the bank, they'll send you one of these. You have to report that on your tax return. Dividend income, likewise. Non-employee compensation. If you work for yourself, okay, that's going to be taxable income and will probably be subject to not only the income tax, but also the Social Security tax, the FICA Medicare tax that employers typically pay on behalf of employees. Okay, a couple of things for students, especially some of our international students. I think this is really important. But if you're a student, you may get a fellowship. Is that taxable? No. If you're a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident in the United States, it's not taxable, but it's just there to get you in school and help you out, but it can't cover tuition and fees. Same thing with scholarships. Okay, so scholarships, they're not taxable if they're covering tuition and fees, but if they're covering room and board or just a stipend for living expense, that would be considered taxable income. Now this bullet here, IRS charges 14% tax rate. This is based on treaties that the U.S. has with different countries. And so international students that are here temporarily may have taxes that they have to pay on this fellowship income they receive, but the employee folks, the folks that are arranging the fellowships and all that, they'll tell you about all this, and they'll make sure that you're doing the correct things. A couple of things not quite as common, but rental income. Say you have a rental house, or you had a house that you tried to sell and decided to rent it instead. The income you receive on that is taxable. You may also be eligible for deductions to reduce the amount of rental income. Depreciation for one. If you're renting out a property, you're entitled for depreciation expense to reduce that income. It's within certain limits. So I would say if you're not used to doing this, and I know a lot of people that do lend out or rent out their homes or have rental properties to students and like that, they're used to doing this, but it's the income is key. You have to report that, and then you have a lot of deductions that you're eligible to take against that rental income. You also have to declare and pay tax on gains from sale and investments. So let's say you had Chevron stock that you bought 10 years ago, and you looked at the market and it's gone up so far because their earnings are way up and all that. Well, if you sell it, might be a good time to sell it, but you have to report that sale. And the market, your broker will report that information to you. They generally won't report the amount of your basis. So they'll just report the total payment amount, the amount they paid that you received for the sale, and you have to keep track of what you originally paid for it so you can reduce that amount, the amount of taxable income. The last item here, man, this one disappoints me, but at the same time, I don't win that much on those scratchers in Georgia, so it's not a big deal. But gambling winnings, if you win money gambling, whether it's casino or scratchers or whatever it is, that's subject to tax. It's like, well, can I deduct my losses? Well, no, not really. Your losses can be deducted in a different place on the return, which generally precludes you from getting much of a benefit from it. So just put that in there for information. I don't know that it's too much to worry about. Let's move on to the next slide. That's everything that's taxable. And here's the key slide in this whole slide deck, I would say, is when do you file and where do you get help to file? So the returns for 2022 are due no later than April 18th. Okay, April 18th, 2023. So we've got a couple of months yet to do that. But you have to have a Social Security number and able to file a tax return. If you've been getting income, you probably have one because your employer would have required you or asked for it, or asked for this last item, your IRS taxpayer ID. So you probably have those. You just need to be sure that you have them available when you start working on your tax return. Now, if you want some help, and I encourage you to do this, we actually provide this kind of help for a lot of students, a lot of employees on campus, and I encourage you to take advantage of it. It's called VITA, Voluntary Income Tax Assistance. It's an IRS program. In fact, we have people that train our volunteers, make sure they're certified tax return preparers to qualified and eligible to prepare your return. One place you can do that, Regions Institute for Financial Literacy, that's here in the Collette School of Business. Right when you come through the door, you'll see it on your left. So here's the website also, if you want to take a look at that. And the hours of operation. So this is kind of what it is as we ramp up closer to tax filing date. That may get longer, but do call for an appointment and make sure there's somebody there that can receive your income and get to work on it right away. The other place is United Way of Central Alabama. We've been partnering with the United Way of Central Alabama for a number of years, more than 10 years, in doing this VITA program. They do that at the United Way office. If United Way of Central Alabama, if you know where that is, it's not hard to get to from here. It's just down 8th Avenue, about the time you get to the golf course down that way. But also, again, give them a call, schedule an appointment. They are easy to work with. And, VITA is easy to work with as well. They can answer a lot of questions and help you get through the process without driving you nuts, right? Don't let the taxes drive you nuts. We got, you can get people that can help you out with it. But if you're going to do that, you got to get some stuff together. We mentioned a few of these things already, but you will be receiving income or statements from different places for your interest, dividends. If you're retired, you'll get a statement reporting your retirement plan income that's been paid to you. And this little item here, Social Security benefits received. Ignore those little letters in front of Social Security. That's inadvertently there. I just messed up making a slide. Anyway, Social Security benefits received, that gets reported to you, and it probably includes also on that same statement the amount that was withheld to pay your Medicare benefits. Okay, so your Medicare withholdings would be there. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One is that it can be a deduction. It can serve as a medical expense deduction on your return. If you're doing the return with Central United Way or with Rife, This will be one of the questions you get asked. You put it into the system, and it will deduct it if you can. And that's one of the good things about these two places. They use tax preparation software, and that, for one thing, prevents you missing potential deductions and making mistakes. But there's also the training, the certified training for the IRS, and there's a thorough review process. No return is just done by a single person and thrown into the hopper. It's a defined process to make sure that it is a quality process. So I would do this. Highly recommend this before you go to somebody on the corner that says we're going to give you a loan, payday loan places and stuff like that. I'm not sure that you're going to get good quality service for those, but probably shouldn't say stuff like that. But this is a good, reliable way to make sure you get everything that you deserve. So the deductions, we're talking about itemized deductions, and notice I put, but don't get your hopes up, because there's a lot of limitations. So just because you have $10 in medical expenses, that's probably not going to help you. But if you add them up with a lot of other things, it can help you. So medical expenses can be itemized deductions. The big three, I would say, interest expense, taxes paid, interest, taxes. Those are the three: medical, interest expense, taxes paid. And when we say interest expense, we're only talking about home mortgage interest. And you can have two homes and get the tax deduction for that. Taxes paid is something to watch out for, because state and local taxes, you're getting that withheld from your check as well. If you're working at UAB, they're going to withhold state income taxes. They're going to withhold Jefferson County taxes, withhold City of Birmingham taxes, and all those would be deductible under this provision. With the taxes and the interest, one thing though is it's not an unlimited deduction. To some extent, it depends on what your income is. If your income is in the range that you get your tax return done with the help of VITA, then this probably is not going to be an issue for you, except for gathering all the documents. If you're making six figures and this is not as big a deal, one thing, what are you going to do if you have a little bit of this, not too much? Well, you got your standard deduction. And if we go back to that very first slide, the amounts that were listed there said you're required to file these amounts if you have this much income. Well, that's also your standard deduction. So if you're single and you make $12,000, you're going to get a standard deduction that wipes out all your taxes. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I don't know how many will fall into some of these questions, but over the years, we've had a few questions that have come up. So I thought I'd stick these at the end of the slide deck and frequently asked questions, right? We always got to have FAQs, isn't that right? So anyway, so the first question, do I need to complete a tax return if I'm a postdoctoral trainee? Yeah. And here, there's nothing special about being postdoc. You just get paid for it, paid for going to school. And so that income is taxable. So we have a number of postdocs that generally come to the VITA sites, and we help them with preparing the returns. And it's a lot of fun, to tell you the truth. Um, so next question is, I'm married, but my spouse doesn't live in the U.S. Can I claim them as a dependent? Well, not as a dependent, but there is a special kind of way you have to handle that. So if you're filing a joint return with your spouse, they will be treated as a resident for tax purposes. And that's probably the most beneficial way to do that. If your spouse is not a resident but lives outside the United States, it's a little bit different situation, and they have to report all their worldwide income on the U.S. return, but you do get a credit for taxes you pay in other countries. So it's not like you're double dipping, have to pay twice to all the different places that you live and work. But you do have to report all this. Then the next one is, where can I access my tax documents? And if you work or go to school at UAB, you can get it through Oracle and Blazor and BlazorNet. So go in there and find that, and it's pretty easy to find that in there and print it out and use that for your return. Now, on these documents, it's not just the income that's reported to you. So it's, even if you didn't make a lot or whatever, you need to check this out, because it has all your withholdings on there, it has all your medical deductions and other things that you've had withheld from your paycheck since you've been working here. And some of those may be useful in preparing your return. If you're getting income, W-2 income from someplace other than UAB, that'll be mailed to you or emailed to you. So you can get that in the same kind of setup there. Okay, then is there a place that assists with tax return prep? Yeah, that goes back to the previous slide we talked about. In the School of Business, Regions Institute for Financial Education, come on down. Your income must be $58,000 or less is by rule, but we don't turn anybody away either. If you show up and you make $62,000, we'll still do your return. So don't look at that as an absolute number or anything. Come on down, but call first. Make sure there's somebody here when you want to come down, and we'll put it all together. Okay, one question that's interesting to a lot of people: what's the difference between non-resident and a resident alien? Well, a non-resident is somebody who does not live in the U.S. but may generate income and owe tax to the U.S. government. Okay, resident aliens, on the other hand, okay, they have to pay tax on all worldwide income, but that's because they live here in the United States. So this is another one of those things that if you're not sure what your situation is, I would come down to Rife and ask somebody, get some help going through this. Everybody's glad to do that. And then it says, what is Form 1042S? Well, that's reports income from outside the U.S. generally. I think that's right. But this would be a sure sign that you need to come talk to us or talk to somebody about your return. A lot of our postdocs receive these, and depending on your treaty status and your visa status, may have different outcomes. Okay, next, need Social Security number. Yes, you do. If you're working in the U.S., you'll need a Social Security number, but you can also get a taxpayer ID number. So that works just as well for tax filings. Do I have to pay taxes on a scholarship? Well, they're tax-free if, right? The big if there. If you're a candidate for a degree and what you receive is used to pay tuition and fees that's required for enrollment and attendance, for books, supplies required for the course. You don't have to pay tax on that. So that's tax free. The next item goes on to say amounts used for room and board. So if you're getting a stipend of some kind, yeah, that's going to be treated just like income you make from working. And so that would be taxable and need to be considered. This form 8843, tell you the truth, I've never seen one of those. Somebody asked about it. But again, that's non-residents, apply to non-residents. So if you're at UAB but you live somewhere else, say if you're here from India going to school, or you're a postdoc, yeah, talk to the folks in in the INTO organization, INTO, and if you're a non-resident student, I'm sure you're familiar with that, but they can help you with it. As a matter of fact, the lady who runs all that, she's really good at all this stuff and knows exactly the right way to steer you on all these items. So, okay, got a few other items here. If you're postdoc, you go back to single married rates. We did this, didn't we? Yeah, we did. I think that's the end. Okay, looking at the messages over here.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll look at those, Dr. Byrd, and you just play the role of Dr. Byrd. That way you don't have to be distracted and try to figure out what's been asked, what hasn't. So I'm going to start right at the bottom with these questions. If anybody does have a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat. If it's too broad, Dr. Byrd will probably refer you to someone else, somewhere else, but we will try to get these answered for you. So go ahead and drop them in the chat. We have plenty of time to get to those. And we'll start with this first one. This person has a child who is 19 and they work. Should she file taxes? And you know what? I have the same question because I've got 3 kids that are 21 and under. They all work, but they don't meet the 13,000 threshold.
Well, are they a dependent on your return? That makes a difference. So if they're working and it's regular employee kind of compensation, then you'd want to probably to get the refund back for withholding amounts, because my experience, my kids and everything don't really make enough to have to pay taxes, but you can get some back. So it's always worth to take a hard look at that so you can get anything back that you're eligible for. Now, if your 19-year-old is, let's see if I can say this right, is receiving non-employment income like interest, taxes, passive income like that, that's treated differently. So if you're treating working employment income, that follows the regular rules. They might have to file separately, but if it's, they would have to file their own return. They can't file there. But if they are making unearned income and really don't have any other income, they may be required to file with you or have a special provision where they pay your level of taxes. So the whole tax scheme is lower people pay a lower percentage, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And higher people, a higher tax bracket, they pay a higher percentage of tax. And if you're in the high tax bracket, but you have a kid that's making money at the bank or at the brokerage or cryptocurrency or whatever, that's passive income, so to speak. and they have to pay tax at your higher rate. And so that's just a caution to take a look at as you start getting into that. But yeah, they're going to have to pay. Also be real careful if you're treating them as dependent on your return. So, take a look at your situation. Ask somebody at Rife or at United Way if it applies in this case and how it would apply in that case. So,
can you tell us of an online program or software package to complete last year's taxes? Obviously, there are these services available that we've talked about, but are there online things that are ones that you would suggest or encourage people to use over others?
Well, there's several good packages. I use TurboTax. So TurboTax, I've been using that for 15, 20 years, and it makes a lot of it easier. At Vita, we use a different one that's just as good. So if you go to Office Depot and look on their shelf, there's 3 or 4 of them that you can select, and I think they're all equally good. It's just kind of what do you want to use, and I'm not going to say TurboTax is the best one because it aggravates me sometimes, but it is good. It is very good. And the thing that these online programs or that you can download onto your computer and do the tax returns really help you a lot with is making sure you don't overlook deductions, because they'll walk you through item by item by item, asking you the questions that a tax return preparer would be asking you to make sure you get benefit of all the deductions, all possible deductions that are available. So if you have significant income, I highly recommend it. They're not that expensive.
And I'll say that we use TurboTax as well, and we still get those same issues you have from time to time. I don't think you're going to avoid that from much else. What should I do if my spouse is with F2 and doesn't have a Social Security number or ITIN?
F2?
That's what they said.
I don't know what that is. So I would go to the people that you've been working with, your employer, and they should know what that is. That sounds like a visa status. It's perhaps related to postdoc or some other working here at UAB. And so I would look at that, get somebody from that department to help you with it.
This person has worked on campus for 2 months now. They haven't received their W-2. Remind us where UAB employees can find that, because even when I go out to find it, sometimes it can be a challenge because you have to be looking in the right spots.
Yeah, you go to your BlazerNet, and in Blazer, one of the little tabs, it pops up, and you got about a zillion little places that you can go. One of them's Oracle W-2. So just find it in there. I think last time I looked in there, it's like the middle of the page. So I don't know if it moves around or not, but maybe it's still in the middle of the page there. You can just look for it there and click on that, and you'll be able to access not only your current W-2, but if you've had some prior W-2s, and you'll be able to see your pay stubs and things like that. So if you're new, but perhaps you were working somewhere else last year, and you have some charitable contributions, like you're making United Way contributions or something in December, you can get that from your pay stub. And so be sure and look for those as well.
Where should people submit all their documents once they gather everything?
Come to Rife at Collat. get an appointment, come see us, or go to United Way. It's down the street. Like I said, I've been working not for, but with, we're volunteers down there, but working with them on the tax return preparation for years. And Judy Allen and her staff, they actually come down and teach our employees, our volunteers for Rife in our facilities up here. So they're very giving and helpful in the community too in that way. So they're going to make sure that all the preparers are qualified and that they're going to be a resource for everybody that's preparing returns in the VITA program.
What is the best way
to answer the question?
I think it might. If they didn't, they'll go ahead and drop it in the chat. What is the best way to file if a spouse has a W-2, but this person's a PhD student getting a 1098-T, and thus they're paying taxes at the end rather month to month? Should they file jointly, separately? Any specific boxes they need to check on the spouse's W-2 or specific exemptions?
So the 1099, what is that?
1098-T.
1098-T, that's for tuition. Does that tell you how much tuition? Am I getting that right, or am I missing that? I think that's just reported differently. And so I would still file jointly, because even if your spouse has different income or no income, it's probably, if you have income, your spouse doesn't have income, that's going to help you get a lower tax rate on your income. So almost in every case, it's going to be beneficial to file a joint tax return if you're married.
Any specific boxes or exemptions they should be looking at when they're filing?
Well, there's one that says married filing jointly. Check that box. You're also going to be asked a number of things that are on your W-2. So on your W-2, it's going to report to you how much you paid in taxes. And so that's a key element to preparing your tax return. You want to definitely get credit for that. And they'll have one block for federal, one block for state. And then additional at the very bottom of the W-2, they'll have about Birmingham taxes, Jefferson County taxes. So there's a lot of information there. You've also got information on there that reports how much you paid in FICA. FICA is, we all call it Social Security withholdings, but let you know how much you're giving the government for that too. Of course, they're putting it in their trust fund to repay you Social Security benefits when you retire. So not totally lost. All this, one thing I just want to say this, I guess it's the old tax guy in me coming out, is that there's a reason for taxes. And it's not always fun, but we got to pay for the government somehow, get people working and doing all this stuff. And that's all taxes are. It's just paying for the government, paying for the different services that we get. And if you look at some of the provisions and some of the tax laws that are created, they may not make sense. Well, that's not what they're trying to do, right? So don't let that frustrate you. But if it does frustrate you, we'll be glad to talk with you about it. It's just a matter of paying for the government and all the services and everything that we do. And so they got to get that money from somewhere. And that's what taxes are about. So, you get double W-2s, like, why do I have to do this? Well, that's why, and that's why it may not make sense. Okay, so you're going to have the amount they withhold from Medicare on there as well. So you get some feedback about what you're paying into the Medicare fund. Trying to think what else is commonly owned there. There's going to be a couple blocks for, are you in a retirement plan? Do you have a 401k? Do you have an IRA? So you're going to have to check those blocks when you're preparing a return, because that makes a difference in certain items. You probably will receive a statement related to your medical and how much you're having withheld from wherever you're working to pay your medical expenses. Because I know, like UAB, they pay a sizable portion. Well, they pay everything for employees. They actually pay more than what they tell us they're withholding from our check. Pay a lot more than what they hold from our check for medical benefits, but they'll also report that to you. All that's on the W-2. So that's just a document, sort of full disclosure in a lot of ways, I think.
So based on guidance from H&R Block, this person has not been reporting their stipend from UAB. Now they're preparing their tax report as a postdoc. Are they in trouble for missing the past year's reports?
I'm not going to say yes or no, because I'd have to look at it and see exactly what the situation is. There's a lot of ways that even if you didn't pay taxes that you should have, that you may not be in trouble. The trouble comes if you partially because you didn't file when you should have filed, but it's really more about if you didn't pay when you should have paid. So the penalties are going to be based on your underpayments. So if you didn't file, but you've been paying your taxes, there's not going to be any repercussions to it. I would just get somebody to go through it with you. The stipend, there's other reasons that might not be taxable. It could be below the standard deduction. It could be, from a special treaty that you have if you're from a different country or something like that. So I really recommend that you get somebody to look at that for your case in particular.
And for that person and for everybody else, we do have those phone numbers in the chat. Go ahead, scroll down on those to find those and get in contact with the appropriate people. Next question. This person worked a part-time job at the university as an international student. Only the Alabama state tax was deducted on their pay slip. Do they still file a W-2? Why may not their federal deduction been taken out?
It may have been below, income may have been below the amount that was required to deduct, to withhold.
Okay.
It doesn't keep you from having to file taxes, but they use withholding tables to determine how much they're going to withhold from each check. And so it just didn't sync up. But, you may not have to pay any tax. So again, that's one of those situations. You just prepare your tax return and see how it comes out.
Yeah. This person tried using TurboTax, but they're a non-resident alien and need to file it using a form 1040-NR. Can they still use TurboTax or other online platforms?
I just have to look that one up. There are things that TurboTax has in their system that if you just scroll through it as like a first-time user, you'd never see. And you have to actually go looking for it and look for the instructions to tell you how to report that income. I'll give you an example of that. My nephew, he didn't make very much money, not enough to file a tax return, but he had an issue where he had some debt forgiven. And so there's special rules that applied to that. And you really don't see that anywhere, but you can file it through TurboTax, but you have to go find it yourself. Or, I think when you buy TurboTax, there's a helpline in there. And don't hesitate to ask the helpline or come see us.
Yeah.
The helpline too.
When it comes to VITA, is the 58,000 the AGI or gross? And I think we kind of said that, come on in, even if you're above that, but just for clarification.
I'd say AGI.
Okay.
And that may be increased. It's not going to go down. It may be going up a little bit. That was last year's amount. So it may be 60,000 this year, but I would still come on in. And if you hit the lottery, we can't help you.
And if you hit the lottery, good for you. Congratulations.
Yes,
Last
absolutely.
question. Last question, unless another one comes in the chat. If they've used TurboTax in the past, but they want to come to Rife, is that problematic?
No, it's you can still come to Rife. Rife uses a different software program, but they'll still help you with it. It just be a different way of loading your information into the system. That's the only difference, really.
Had a question sneak in here, and it's a great one. What is an IPN, and why do we need it to sign the return?
That goes with the software, doesn't it?
I think so, because I remember doing that with TurboTax.
Yeah, so that's just an identifier so that the system can identify your return with the IRS, but it's not really anything of significance. And as a matter of fact, I don't even put a real number in there. I do TurboTax. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something. So, it's really not a significant item, except you have to do it to electronically file.
Just part of the process. Dr. Byrd, thank you so much for spending the last hour with us and shedding light onto some things that we need to consider as April 18th, 2023 rolls by.
Glad to be here. I enjoyed it. Y'all get in touch with me if I can help further, or come down to Rife.
Look in the chat, find those numbers. And just a reminder, today's webinar has been recorded. A replay will be placed online tomorrow. If you are in the Birmingham area, join us for Blazer Bingo tomorrow night. For $25, you'll get to play 6 sets of 10 games. Lead with the dauber and have a chance to win prizes. The cash bar will also be available. Register at alumni.uab.edu/bingo. And join us for other events we have scheduled on Tuesday, February 21st. Log in for Sweet Dreams Are Made of These, Strategies for Improving Your Sleep. Dr. Megan Hayes, clinical psychologist in the Hearsing School of Medicine, will show us why sleep is critical for long-term health. Give back and earn credit toward an Evergreen certificate during UAB Unite Day 2023. Join us on Saturday, March 4th as we work on projects at Glen Ayers Elementary School here in Birmingham. Juniors and seniors are invited to take part in a Blazer Alumni and Student Networking Night on Wednesday, March 8th at the Alumni House. Gain professional relationships and meet fellow Blazers as you get ready to embark on the next phase of your life. And on Saturday, April 15th, hit the road with us for the 17th annual scholarship run presented by Viva Health. $30 early bird registration is available through the beginning of March. Run with us as we support student scholarships. You can register for these and more at alumni.uab.edu/events. Finally, we love your feedback. Did you like today's webinar? Do you have ideas for future events? The QR code on your screen will take you to a short survey. Take a minute and let us know how we're doing. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. And as always, go Blazers.